which is always fun. Half the time with Facebook, you never know if you're actually live because they don't do it. Even if they do a countdown, it's always, there's a delay.
So on my side, I think we're live.
Yes. All right. Welcome everybody. If you're out there and you've tuned in, this is Kevin Hunting with 2 Steps Forward Coaching. And I have the amazing pleasure of having Kristien Turner here from HSBC, but in this capacity, in terms of this interview, this is really based on his personal experience and is not related to HSBC in any way, shape, or form. Just putting that out there. And so in stepping out this video series that we do, Kristien, first, I'd just love to start off by you maybe sharing a little bit about your work history and experience and where you've been since you've sort of been all over the world.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been so lovely getting to know you, Kevin, over the last 6-9 months now. Obviously we met pre-corona, and we've been on this journey with the US-Mexican Chamber of Commerce together, and with our Together We Advance committee. So it's just been awesome getting to know you. So thanks for inviting me today.
Absolutely.
I think my journey's really been defined a lot for my passion and love of both Spanish language and Spanish culture. From an early age, it was my favorite subject at school. My favorite teacher at high school from the age of 11 was my Spanish teacher, Mrs. Anderson. Best teacher I ever had. Best holidays I ever had were to southern Spain. And I knew that I wanted to work outside of the UK, overseas, using language, working in diverse teams, working with people that just didn't think and speak and appear the same as I was, right? I wanted to be around other people. I wanted to learn. I wanted to absorb other cultures. And so really from an early age, I knew that. I chose my degree because of that. So I chose international business with Spanish, and that particular course had a year overseas in Madrid. So I got to spend an incredible year in Madrid, which is still my favorite city on the planet. And I met some of my best friends, and a huge challenge actually, learning and studying in a different language as a 20-year-old, doing multiple exams that were all being put towards my final degree, and just kind of stepping out of our comfort zones, right, from an early age, and learning to adapt and to evolve. And I remember negotiating my lease on my apartment in Spain. I think I was 19 at the time, and doing everything in Spanish and just feeling great, and just feeling kind of different, I guess the word is really. And so from there, knew that I wanted to kind of continue the international theme, chose a program with my current employer that's international in nature. They kind of send us around the world every 2 or 3 years as an international expat. You never really quite know where they're going to send you. And I remember after completing our basic training, it was our last evening. We were sat at dinner, and we got a golden envelope, and it had our destination in there. And the person next to me got India. The person before him had Sri Lanka. Somebody else had Azerbaijan. And I was up next, and I thought, wow, what exotic location am I going to get? And I got Mexico City. And it was just the best news ever. Didn't know anyone in Mexico City, Kevin. Didn't have any reference point to Mexico City. I think being a Brit, I thought of these beautiful beaches, and suddenly I was thinking of the Caribbean, and very, very basic, little to no knowledge of Mexican culture. And within 2 weeks, I had my visa, and I was on a plane, and I was off to Mexico City. So started there, had 2 years in Mexico City, just an incredible immersion into the culture, all of the incredible sights and sounds and tastes of just what is one of my favorite countries in the world. And that was a position where I really earned my marketing stripes, a lot of partnership work, a lot of agency work, really thinking about how we communicate to our international customer set in Mexico City. From that, I moved over to London, where I led a customer engagement program within our global marketing function. That was a great couple of years, and lovely to be back closer to home and closer to the family. But then was itching to get back again to kind of a slightly more exotic and slightly more different culture. And so I accepted a role in Argentina. I was there for 2 years as head of marketing. It was a lovely opportunity to be in Argentina. It was 2013, 2014. the country was going through a lot of change, a lot of evolution, and it was a chance to really digitalize. And I think a fun fact about Argentina that a lot of people forget is just what incredible minds and incredible technology and forward-thinking people that live and work down there. So we really got a chance to digitalize a lot of our marketing practice, a lot of our sponsorship activity, a lot of our outreach with customers. That was a great role. I met a lovely, my then boss down in Argentina. I met a lovely colleague up in New York City who invited me to move to New York and cover our international business, and as an international marketing head. Did that, loved that, working again with multiple different cultures, but always with a strong bias to Latin America and working closely with the region. And then, of course, 3 years ago, made the transition to Miami, where I put a little bit of the business head together with the marketing side, the communication side, and we're doing a lot of work with our corporate partners and also with our community groups around financial literacy, which frankly, Kevin, during the last 6 to 9 months that we've been living, has actually become even more fulfilling, because so many people that are out there need support with their finances.
Absolutely.
Whether they're students, whether they're graduates, or whether they're experienced hires, they just need support. And so that brings us up to today, really.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. So my next question is how would you say that, like, living and working right in these various global cities from Argentina to New York City, what insights have you been able to kind of garner about yourself as maybe as a individually, as a person, but also related to your profession?
I think I look back at what I've been able to develop over the last 11, 12 years of all these moves. And I think adaptability and also acceptance are 2 words that come to mind. I remember on day 1 in Mexico, all of my colleagues coming over, and if it was obviously the men, they were giving me kind of a bear hug. If it was the women, everyone was kissing in the office. And that's just what you do in a Mexican workplace. And I remember for this kind of Brit that was 21 years old, thinking, okay, you've always got to maintain some professional distance with your colleagues. You need to keep things professional. It was a real kind of, not eye-opener, it was just different. And I think it took me a day just to process it and realize that was normal. And then by day 2, I'm there as well, hugging and giving a kiss on the cheek every morning to your colleagues and saying good morning, and having genuine, heartfelt conversations with your colleagues about life. Down in Latin America, and Argentina shares this as well, people are open books and people bring their whole selves to the office. And so you get to know your colleagues' children. You get to talk about their spouses. You talk about family members that might be sick. People really open up. And I love that. But just like that anecdote, there's multiple examples of being in situations where I never really had a reference point growing up in England for how these kind of Latin cultures would be working and operating. And so just that ability to kind of adapt and flex. And, then of course I came to work in New York City from Argentina. And I remember I moved on a 6th of January. It was a snowstorm in New York. And it was literally from this warm environment, warm climate, to snowstorms in New York City. And again, that distance, that professional distance. And so being able to adapt and being able to quickly understand the local situation and scenario and just flex my style accordingly, that's something that I've really learned, and a skill that I've kind of honed based on all these moves, and based on a desire really to want to fit in and want to be a part of the team and want to contribute from day 1. I didn't want to be, the person sitting in the corner of the room that wasn't integrating with my colleagues. I wanted to be a part of the team. And to do that, I needed to adapt and evolve very quickly. And it's not just Latin cultures either, Kevin. I've done a lot of work out in Asia as well. I've never lived out there, but I've traveled over there quite a bit with work. And again, that was when I was working and living in Mexico and Argentina. So again, going from those 2 extremes of hugs and kisses and big smiles to, again, what at first glance can be a little standoffish, but actually is warm in its own way, but very different way. And so just having that exposure, having that extreme almost in moods and workplace environments has led me to be able to adapt quickly and evolve quickly. And I think that's a good skill to have. And I don't think
especially with things, I mean, in today's day and age, things are moving so quickly, right? Whether it's, it doesn't matter. Everyone talks about technology, which is a huge factor because it is moving at really the speed of light to a certain extent. But there are other factors too that, like you said, even throughout your career, I know that for a lot of people, right, you sometimes can get, it's not that you get stuck, you just get very comfortable with where you're at. But what sometimes can happen, right, is skills, the demand for certain skills around you are also progressing at such a
Yeah.
level and speed that, you find yourself at times like, wow, I need to learn all of this or learn something new, because you have sort of just been comfortable in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the pandemic has led everyone to want to reinvent themselves. And if not reinvent, because reinvent kind of conjures up this idea of doing a full 360 and going in a completely different direction. It might not even be that extreme, right, Kevin? It might just be a slight pivot. But I think a lot of people are realizing, wow, I was doing marketing, but actually those skills could be applied to employer branding. So I'm going to try HR. I've been a great salesman, but actually now there's an opportunity to get involved in digital projects, because that's the future in terms of kind of direct to consumer fulfillment. So we're going to go in that direction. People are saying, I've got this great experience, but let me pivot. And it's not a 360, it's a 180, but it's let's go in a slightly different direction. And I think rather than seeing that as like oh, this is strange on somebody's resume or LinkedIn, people actually are saying now, that's kind of cool. I want to move on. I want to evolve. I want to learn new skills. I think almost staying in the same place, the same role, the same function for your entire career is kind of a little old hat. I don't know if you agree with that.
I do. And I think it also maybe depends by the role, the type of role, job role, I would say. I mean, I think of, for all of those accountants out there who, serve obviously a major purpose when it comes to large, both small and large organizations. I mean, accounting has changed, but it is a discipline where there's a lot of tried and true, I think, methodologies, right? And
Correct.
like, there's just certain rules and regulations. And so, I think that it depends on the type of role. And I'm noticing that I think it's freezing right now. So I'll just give it a minute. You're freezing on your side. And so it might be my internet connection.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can. I think we're caught up.
Okay. So one thing is, I mean, this is amazing. So what would you say, like, if you had to look back at like a major obstacle that you faced professionally as you kind of moved up, right? You were moving up and assuming these newer sort of bigger roles, probably managing teams or people, or taking on additional, like you said, newer responsibilities that helped stretch you. What would you say was like a major obstacle that you have faced, and how did you personally overcome that obstacle?
Yeah. I think obstacles a great word. I think also just biggest professional challenge as well was my transition from being a sole contributor to a people manager. And that happened when I went from London to Argentina. And again, I remember rocking up on day one. I had a team that had spent 20 years or more on average in the role. And there's me day one with all the energy and all this enthusiasm, wanting to make lots of change. And I think for me, it was a real eye-opener in how to go into a role with energy, with enthusiasm, with ideas, but not be a steamroller that it's kind of saying, I'm ready, I'm making the changes, I'm doing it now, without understanding the full context, the full environment, and the personalities at play as well.
Absolutely.
And you never get it right. So I probably did start to suggest changes or point out things that were suboptimal or things that I thought could be improved a little too early on. And I think in hindsight, I would now suggest, I don't know, and again, I'd love your point of view on this. I'd suggest waiting probably 10 to 12 weeks. And I know in not all roles and all fields, you get that luxury of that amount of time. But I think waiting 2 or 3 months to understand the full context of what's been done before and where people are at before making sweeping change and sweeping moves is good. I think it inspires a dialogue. It inspires a conversation. It also shows the other parties that actually you're not going in implementing your ideas without taking into consideration their thoughts and opinions. So that was my biggest challenge. And I'd give myself probably a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. I definitely think there was room for improvement. But I was learning.
Right. I agree with you. It's a very tricky situation because as much as, right, you may have like your senior leadership team telling you like, we need to move quickly with some big change. I think a lot of times the overzealousness of the change itself actually results in a longer implementation timeline because of the factor that you just spoke of. people, when you look at humans, and that's the human capital, right, that you're working with in any organization, change doesn't happen that quickly.
I agree.
Unfortunately, and it's so individualistic as well. You have some people, right, who are those early, like in technology, right, those early adopters who are out there front and center, like, yeah, let's do it. I'm ready. I want to be a part of this. And then you have those people who, those individuals who, for whatever reason, change, the notion of change on a very individual level for them is something very, very hard to step into, because there's a certain comfort, again, being, right, staying and doing things the way that you've perhaps always done them. And so I agree with you that it is a tough situation. And of course, it only really helps. You have to have buy-in from, I think, the top when you're talking about pretty significant changes. And I've seen where in organizations, they've tried almost a bottom-up approach versus a top-down. And that is even more of a struggle, because it's almost like you are both salesman or woman trying to, and an educator trying to educate, trying to, you're wearing all these hats while you're trying to implement the change that you're responsible for. And it doesn't tend to work, because a lot of people even then are more skeptical. They're questioning, well, why isn't, the head of our division or the head of the company, why aren't they here laying sort of a framework and setting what the pace is going to be in the vision, so that everyone understands that. So it's a complex thing. Like you said, there's so many variables to deal with.
I think the switch, the kind of change that I made, and I learned this early on when I was down there, was how to bring the team along on the journey. So I remember I had this incredible events coordinator, strategist. She was just the most epic events person in Argentina. And she just did an incredible job with physical events. It didn't matter if it was 300 people, 1,000 people in a business forum, a 5,000 person conference. She just executed beautiful events. And I remember going down saying, well, we need to do more on digital. We need to reach a larger audience. It needs to be pan-regional. And I remember at first the conversation being a little bit, oh, you're going to take some budget away from what I've been doing successfully for 20 years. But I was able to change the narrative and say, actually, I want you to execute the most epic Google Hangout. And we're going to have this beautiful staging, and we're going to have this great storytelling, and you'll still engage with the clients, and there will be this wonderful case study. But it's just going to be a different audience. Rather than a live event, it's going to be a digital event. And I remember trying to change the narrative to say, I'm helping you evolve. Together, we're actually moving in the right direction towards the 21st century, and digitalizing and new skills, and you're upskilling as well. And I kind of learned how to spin. I don't know if spin's the right word, but kind of change that narrative. So it wasn't me going and saying what you've been doing is wrong. It was me saying, I think what you've been doing is fabulous, and you've got these incredible skills, and I respect your craft. However, there's a way we can use that in a slightly more relevant way to have greater impact. So that was something that I kind of learned on the job, and it was very organic. But yeah, that was definitely a way to bring that team around and help with those transitions when moving into a new market.
Awesome. And so I know that you could choose a plethora. So this might be a tough question. You might have to take a moment to just think a little bit, and that's fine. What skills would you say have been the most important to you in terms of maybe even where you've been now and where you may be going, like, kind of more in the present, because I'm sure those skills have changed over time. But what would you say are some of the skills that for you have been the most important to your overall career growth and success?
I love that question. I think the one that just stands out above all others is actually relationship building and people. So we can talk about technical skills, we can talk about knowledge and past experiences and years and months project managing different kind of area. No, for me, it's all about developing relationships with individuals, with people, whether that's with our customers, whether that's with our colleagues, and actually with mentors. And I've realized that actually from here on in my career, the individuals that are going to place me into the roles in the future are the ones that have seen me grow over the last 11 years, and the ones with whom I still maintain a fantastic mentoring relationship, where every 6 to 8 weeks we catch up. They're excited to hear about progress on some of my projects. I'm excited to learn from them, hear what's going on. Most of those mentors aren't based here in the US. They're based overseas. They're in Latin America, they're in London, they're in Asia. I'm getting different perspectives. And I've just loved that role of a mentor, having a mentor. From day one, Kevin, when I started in Mexico, I asked for a mentor and I got the most epic one that's still my main kind of go-to today. And I could probably count 10 or 15 people that consistently are present in my professional life that are constantly mentoring me. They're a great sounding board for any big decisions, career moves that I'm looking to make. So for me, it's been that ability to build trusted relationships from whom I can learn. And then it's interesting, part of that cycle, the last few years, I've now started mentoring the graduates. And
so then now the roles are a bit reversed, like not reversed.
Right. Or actually, I find myself, even with my mentors, they're saying to me, oh, we've got this awesome digital project. We'd love your perspective. And I find myself almost, it's a little bit like reverse mentoring. I'm giving them, hopefully just as much valuable content and ideas and excitement as they're giving me. So that has been a real awesome, figure, these figures of these mentors in my career up until now. And I just know that will continue to just grow moving forward. Personally, I love mentoring. And I love doing that with individuals that are from multiple different markets, countries. I actually start a new mentoring relationship this afternoon with a gentleman that's in Mexico City who's looking to kind of go international and move to Europe. So that's exciting. So I just love, again, I try to always make sure it's balanced. I don't know if it's yin and yang, or just kind of subconsciously wanting to give back as much as I'm receiving. If I've got 10 or 15 mentors, again, I want to be helping a similar number in their career and bringing kind of through that next generation, that next pipeline of talent. So I love doing that and make as much time as humanly possible to do that.
And to me, what I'm hearing you say too is it's almost like in any given relationship that you have, those mentoring type of relationships, you're both like what I would say, like teacher and student, right? You're both learning from someone, but they may also be learning from you as well. In the dynamic that you've been creating with them over time.
100%. And I think so many people miss out on that. I think there's so many people that are afraid to ask. And I think they think they're asking for help. They're actually not. They're actually asking to sit down like we are now, having a great conversation with a cup of coffee in hand, and just sharing stories and examples and anecdotes with somebody that might be more experienced than them or in a different industry or in a different role. And that ideas exchange is so valuable, is priceless. And I just think lots of people miss out on that because they're afraid to be a little vulnerable. They're afraid to maybe kind of expose a knowledge gap in a certain area. And I'm the complete opposite. If I've got a gap and an opportunity to close that, and it's a colleague or a friend, and so hence it's free of charge, why wouldn't I take advantage of it? Why wouldn't I put myself out there to learn and to get better? So I think that's a mentality that some people still struggle with. And I think for anybody out there that's thinking that, I just say, break that paradigm, get a little vulnerable, ask that awesome colleague, that person you've always been inspired by, that person at work that's a couple of levels kind of more senior, but also accessible and open to sharing ideas. Ask them for time, put 30 minutes on the diary. And I think the new environment that we're in, whilst everyone's feeling a little Zoom fatigue, I do think people want to make time, Kevin, at least 2 or 3 times a week for a little 30-minute informal catch up, debrief, knowledge share. People want to create space for that, right? Outside of the 9 to 5.
And it's interesting. I love how you use the word vulnerable, because a lot of times in large corporate cultures, such as, that you're in and that I've been in, a lot of times, depending on the culture too, just the overall kind of work culture, how it's set up, sometimes there isn't a place. You don't feel that there's a place for vulnerability because it can be very, competitive environment. You feel that you always have to be, on top of your game, understand the ins and outs of obviously the specific responsibilities that you have in your job. And so I think that's a really, really fantastic point you're making, because I don't think that there's probably enough discussion around how vulnerability can actually be a strength in a corporate, like larger corporate settings, because I sometimes think that the dynamic that gets created doesn't even really promote being vulnerable. Make sense?
Completely agree. Totally agree.
You've chosen, like you said, you individually have decided for yourself that allowing yourself to be vulnerable has actually helped you. It has actually, probably gotten you to where you are and will continue to move you forward. But I think it's a really interesting point that, you know, there should be more discussion about how vulnerability can help you actually in a work setting versus, you know, not being vulnerable.
I agree. And I do think we talk about mentors. I think whilst you can have awesome mentors and advocates in the company and in the firm that you work for, in your own business, if you're a small business or owner, I do think there's a role for having, whether it's a coach or a go-to outside of your firm that has a complete different perspective, is completely impartial, they're not biased, they see things through a different lens. I think that is so important. Because if not, I think you get a little locked down again in the constructs of the culture that is your 9 to 5.
Right, and you start to put parameters around how you think things should operate versus
Correct.
kind of opening yourself up to maybe other possibilities of viewing
Correct.
what could be, right? Or how to approach something differently than like you said, you kind of get a little bit, not blindsided, but you have like blinders on in a way that you're not able to see for yourself, which is, you know, that's the power of having a coach, because I've seen that.
Yeah, and I just think you can, you know, the coaching piece is huge, but also through industry events and through industry conferences and through just LinkedIn networking even, you're able to build this awesome network where, again, you get all those wonderful different perspectives. But no, back to the coaching piece, I've definitely had coaches over the years. And, you know, I often like to go to a coach with a specific need. I remember I had an awesome one in Argentina, and it was around public speaking in Spanish. And, you know, I just had to deliver these killer presentations in front of 1,000 people, and Spanish isn't my mother tongue. And I needed help. And so I went to see, I remember Marcela, and she was, you know, one of the top speaking coaches in Spanish. And I had 10 sessions and I had a very clear objective. And I came out of it being able to speak far more confidently in Spanish in public, and command an audience in Spanish. So I think you can go into those relationships with very clear objectives and goals. But also I think there's other people, right, Kevin, that will go in just wanting a bit of a boost and wanting a confidant and wanting somebody to be a sounding block in terms of career ideas, career development. So I think you could go in with one or two perspectives, a very clear objective, I need to improve this skill, or I would like to develop a longer term relationship with somebody that can help guide me.
And exactly, it can be both. A lot of times though, I mean, as you probably are well aware, any great coaching is really not about directing someone and giving them advice. I mean, if they ask for it, that's one thing, but any great coaching is helping someone, like you said, unlock for themselves the potential of some goal or what they want in their life. And so any great coaching is really about kind of reflective inquiry. It's really more about helping someone go inwards to understand, why is it that you may be believing or thinking what you're thinking, which is, like you said, creating a whole space of perhaps that's limiting you in some way, shape, or form. And we all do it. That's what I'm saying. Even coaches do it. So we're all subject to that. But I love that you talked about vulnerability, which leads me into my next question. This is like a nice lead in. And you talked about confidence. I've seen, and with many of my clients, the notion of confidence is something that comes up on a regular basis of, I need more confidence. I need to have more confidence. And for you personally, how have you been able to address that, given that, like you said, you have faced working in different cultures, working and having to use your Spanish, which is a second language, it's not your first language, to be effective. How have you personally, would you say, been able to build your confidence?
So I love that question, and I love that you linked it to vulnerability, because I think it's through being vulnerable that I've learned to be confident. So putting myself in situations, whether it's walking into that new job in a different culture, in a different language, with a new team for the first time, and having to embrace all of the challenges that throws up, that's helped me build my confidence. I think of so many examples of where I've been thrown into events to host or do some public speaking or lead a large meeting or be around a boardroom with people that are far more senior, older, wiser, experienced than I am, but having to kind of command that environment. And so for me, it's just been about practice, and I'm still on that journey. But it's
I don't think the journey ever ends.
It never ends. It never ends, because actually I think for a lot of us out there that are you know, ambitious and slightly competitive as well. And I think sometimes competitive is used as a dirty word. It shouldn't be, right? I think a lot of people out there, both in corporate world and also building their own businesses, have that element of competition, which is great and healthy when challenged in the right way. I think by us putting ourselves in these new ever-changing environments and getting out of our comfort zone, it helps to build confidence. I think if you stay in your lane for too long and you get too comfortable, that's actually when your confidence gets dashed, because you're looking all around you. And again, we go back to an earlier point around needing to evolve and change in light of what's happening in our environment at the moment. I think if you stay in your lane for too long, that's when actually your confidence gets dashed, because you see all these other people around you that are moving forward, moving ahead, moving sideways, learning new skills, getting new degrees in parallel fields, and they're all evolving and you're staying in your box. And so I think it's breaking out of that, being comfortable to break out of it, move into new fields, learn new skills, put your hand up for new opportunities. In the firm that I work for, there's a huge emphasis on employee resource groups. And so, you know, there's some incredible opportunities for people to lead, you know, lots of awesome coaching events and external engagements and charity partnerships, and really stand up and actually get out of whatever their technical day job is and move into a world that actually demands a lot of soft skills that complement. And so I often think that people that don't want to choose to be uncomfortable sometimes are choosing the easy, slightly lazier option, because there's so many opportunities out there, Kevin, for us to break out of that day-to-day comfort zone, get vulnerable, and in turn grow our confidence, you know, in commensurate levels. So that would be my kind of secret to building confidence. As you said, it never ends.
It doesn't end. And I think to your point, it's just such an interesting topic because it is so personal, deeply personal in terms of how someone approaches, like you said, stepping out from maybe what they're comfortable with. And it's one thing to know that perhaps, this is what I need to do for myself, and I should be doing this in order, or I want to do this, not should. But then being able to step into it, that's where I think sometimes there's some real friction internally is, you know, I think people can just get caught up again on those beliefs about what they think is going to happen or what is not going to happen if they should step out of their comfort zone. But I do agree with you that when you do it and when you are able to kind of move into that space, it's quite magical, because you actually, like you said, you start to reflect and you can look back and say, wow, I can't believe that, you know, I did that, you know, and it just, there's a certain, I think, amount of pride that comes in. I agree. It comes into it. And it's not pride in like ego pride, just pride that you were able to step into it and just do it. Like you said, just do it.
And overcome our fears. And practice really does make perfect. So the first time you try something completely new, you're going to feel nervous, you're going to feel butterflies. And I think that's something really healthy to feel, that adrenaline. So, you know, if you're speaking in public for the first time to a large group, have notes on the screen. Why not have notes on the screen? Why not have an iPad next to the computer with your notes and feel that confidence of, okay, I've got my support system here, great. Next time, say, okay, I'm going to do the intro with some notes, but then I'm going to put that to one side because I feel confident that for 20 minutes, I know my subject, I know what I'm talking about, I can do it without it. By the time you get to the third, fourth, fifth time, you don't need those notes anymore, and you're absolutely able to ad lib, and you know, you don't need the structure. So I think baby steps, growing every time, not putting yourself in a situation where it's a 50-50, am I going to sink or swim? You want to have that support structure around you, but just that slow evolution to get to a final goal, whatever that may be, is really important. So yeah, practice makes perfect.
Awesome. So now switching gears a little bit, not really switching gears, but you know, how would you say, if, and this may be if at all, because I know your experience really has been amazing based on the fact that you, I think, are very sure of, you know, who you are. I mean, it's a constant journey of learning who you are, but you're fairly sure of. How would you say that perhaps, you know, your sexuality, like as a gay male, has I guess helped you in your career, or perhaps, I don't know, hindered? It could be either, right? From an either point of view. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, of course. Lovely question. It was something that I never wanted or needed to hide in the workplace. But I think during my first role in Mexico, it was something that I decided to kind of stay quiet about. It was something that I was kind of going through personally, deciding to feel more comfortable, being out at work. And so I guess by the time I kind of moved through to London, and then by the time I got to Argentina, it was something that I was far more confident discussing. And actually, it's a really beautiful moment when you can bring your whole self to work, when you can sit there having a coffee with colleagues, with your boss, and they say, did you have a lovely weekend? And you can say, yeah, I had an awesome weekend with my boyfriend. Rather than having to kind of say, oh, I was with this friend of mine, and then reference a female or whatever that may be, right? And I think there's so many people out there that are potentially hiding their true selves at work. And that's for a plethora of different reasons, whether it's some pressure in the professional environment or something they're feeling on the personal side. But definitely when you're able to turn that switch and actually bring, and again, that's also a journey and a learning curve that takes time.
Absolutely.
Your whole self to the office. It's just
Actually,
a really beautiful thing.
There's a stat that I had read recently, and I forget, I need to go back, and I can't, the source, I'm having a little bit of challenge like remembering, but I remember the stat itself was that most, like, I think it's over 50% or close to 50% of LGBTQ plus professionals are not out in their workplace.
Right.
And I think, so to me, when you just think about that number alone, and what that means for someone, right? Like you said, that you aren't able to sort of be all of you. And when I say all of you, that doesn't mean that you're coming and wearing like a pride flag every day, or that,
Nope.
That's not what it is. But that component of you is so important because it's the day-to-day, like you said, just sharing of this is a part of my life, whether I have a partner, a husband, boyfriend or girlfriend, or whatever the case may be. Being able to openly share that and just be okay with it, I think, like you said, can have a real effect on your experience personally, and then obviously an impact on your overall professional experience.
I totally agree. It's a weight off your shoulder, but also I like to think of it as well as, what about the next generation, or again, back to that mentor-mentee environment? How lovely is it when somebody can look up and see somebody that, has the same sexuality as they do, or is also, able to be completely open and transparent at work. I love this whole notion that we're moving towards this blended workplace where everyone brings their full self, professional and personal boundaries start to blur, which I think is awesome. And I think, my generation really pushed that forward. I look to kind of my nieces and nephews and that next generation that are coming through, and I think, wow, how awesome is it going to be to, be a 21-year-old starting your career in 5-10 years time? Because, with social media, with Instagram, etc., everyone's sharing and commenting, and people are bringing their full selves to work, and there isn't this need or this desire to want to hide anything.
Absolutely.
So I started to make that transition, and for me, what's been lovely the last few years is getting involved more and more in community projects and partnerships where we're able to actually connect with our LGBT client base, for example. So whether that's with what we're doing at the Mexican Chamber of Commerce here in Miami, where we're doing a lot of outreach with LGBTQ business entrepreneurs, giving them a forum to develop, to expand their professional network. That's pretty awesome. There's been another great partnership I've been involved in here, which is Maven Leadership Collective, that are working with young LGBT youth and talent, or young adults, actually, young professionals that are doing incredible community-based projects to serve the LGBTQ community here locally in South Florida. So you start to find ways to say, okay, so I do financial literacy, and so everybody needs help with creating their business plan and supercharging their small business. How lovely is it if I can use those skills and actually apply it to, our community? So there's been this really nice alignment, but that didn't happen on day one. That wasn't me 11, 12 years ago, confident in myself, in my professional background to be able to do that. That's something that over the last 4 to 5 years I've been developing. And I would say really, actually the last 3 years in Miami, I felt very comfortable embracing, leading, etc. So yeah, that's been pretty awesome. It's been a good journey.
I love what you're saying. Like you said, it is a journey, and it's a journey and a commitment to, yourself, hopefully, and understanding who you are more and more over time. One thing is, how do you have this amazing relationship, this amazing partnership. And so I'm curious, how do you maintain a healthy balance between kind of your relationship as well as your work life as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think actually things have changed the last 7-8 months that we've all been working at home. So yeah, my husband Stephen also works at home. So again, it's about creating space for one another. It's about creating also some time apart as well, some healthy time apart.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's me going for a lovely long walk with a neighbor at the moment during COVID, whether it's taking the dog out, whether it's creating a little bit of space as well. I think it's really important to give each other an opportunity to, work, study alone. We both do a lot of calls. So again, we've been doing that kind of Zoom balance as well. So somebody's got a presentation, a talk. So just coordinating schedules, which is actually really nice because for the first time we're saying, hey, what have you got today? Oh, that's cool. And there's this lovely dialogue about work. Whereas I think in the past I would have, put my suit and tie on, got in the car, gone to the office, I'd have completed my day's work, come home, and we'd have been talking about something else. So it's really blended work and home life. But there's no secret sauce. You just kind of learn how to, live and work together. And it's been lovely to actually share a little bit more about what I do at work and get his opinion on certain things and his input, which has been great.
Awesome. And so my last question, kind of ending on a note where it may be more mentor sounding, is what advice would you perhaps give to some like younger LGBTQ professionals who are really eager, that have that drive and ambition, that are eager to grow in their careers?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do it through my lens, which is the international lens. I'm gonna say, first of all, get a mentor that looks, sounds, is very different to you, right? You don't want to get a mini me. You need somebody that's gonna share their very open, honest experience, that's gonna complement the skills that you've learned, is gonna give you a different perspective, a different outlook. I think secondly, I couldn't, sell it enough, the fact of being able to speak another language as well, right? So putting an international lens on your question, I'd say actually everyone should have an international experience at some point. And I just think it's so enriching. And I know there's people out there that won't want to, or maybe their career kind of ties them to a certain jurisdiction or country, but definitely learn a language because it then helps facilitate that international move. And I think thirdly, for anyone that wants a fantastic international career, you've just got to go abroad. You've got to have these enriching cultural experiences, be out of your comfort zone, be working in diverse teams. And it just is such an incredible learning experience. I think in those 2 years abroad, you can learn more than you could potentially in 5 or 10 years staying at home. It's like a supercharged, super energized experience. So get yourself a mentor that can kind of open your mind, get you thinking slightly differently, learn a language, and get an overseas placement assignment, and start that early on. I think the myth of having to wait 10, 20, 30 years into your career to be a specialist in something in order to move overseas, that's gone. You can move overseas now as your first job out of university. And so think about how that experience can add to your career, can bring you all these awesome skills. They would be my 3 top tips for somebody that is looking to have an international career.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Actually, I would add one last thing to that, which is, and you mentioned earlier, if you are out there and you're LGBTQ plus professional and you find yourself in situations where you need support and help, there is help available to you. And you kind of mentioned it earlier when you said that you partnered with coaches. So I think it's a nice fit as well to just put out there that you don't have to always have to figure it out by yourself. And a mentor, like you said, can certainly help in a certain space to do that. But, leverage a coach where possible and where you think it makes sense for you in terms of where you're at and where you want to go. And the last thing I just want to put a plug in is next week, I'm really excited. I'm going to be having an interview with Vanessa Calva, who is a Mexican career diplomat.
Great.
And I'm really excited to have her on because she has done some amazing work within the ministry just around the LGBTQ community and initiatives, globally speaking. So you won't want to miss it. Join me next Friday and you'll see the advertisings. Not same time, but definitely same place. And thank you so much, Kristien, for being here today.
Absolute pleasure. Happy Friday, and thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
You too. All the best.
Bye.